Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kate Trace with the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. Looks like we've got a good amount of attendees logged on. Some are coming to sign on. So I'll take the first moments just to go through some housekeeping reminders. With me today is Alex Postelnick and Frank Sarno. They are both program administrators for the Housing Stability Services Program. I'm sure over the last few weeks, you've been in contact with them or all of us in either by email or by video call. So we appreciate your time. So Alex, if you could just advance to the next slide, please. We'll go over some housekeeping reminders as other folks get signed on. Okay, so all the material today will be available on our website, on our webpage. I highly recommend that you bookmark this webpage. This is where everything that's going to be related to the Housing Stability Services Program will be posted. Right now, there's a copy of the PowerPoint, some forms that I'm going to reference later on. That all lives on this webpage. You'll also see that in the handouts section of the little webinar panel, you'll be able to download the training PowerPoint that we're going to go through today and a household reporting template that Alex is going to go through in detail. So all of your materials should be available if you want to follow along on your own computer. At the end of today's session, we will leave time for questions and answers. But during the session, please, if something comes up that we're talking about, enter your questions right now. If it's something that we can kind of clear up as we're going through, please let us know. But we will try to leave some time for questions at the end. I think we've got this webinar slated for 2 hours. I tend to expire on virtual meetings a little bit before that, so we'll get through our portion of the materials. We'll take some questions and we'll be well within that 2-hour time frame. So again, I think I've posted this in a couple of places, answered a few questions about this. This training will be recorded. It will be posted on our TDHCA Housing Stability Services website that's linked at the top of this slide. And then all of the materials are going to be posted as well. So if you've got staff in your organization that couldn't make it today, or if you want to go back and re-review some of the information we went over, that training, the recording will be posted probably tomorrow once we get the recording through our IT department. So let's move on to the next slide, which is our agenda. This is kind of I'm gonna wait till that catches up. Alex, there we go. I think the system probably goes a little bit slower once Alex pushes the button. So this is our agenda today. We'll just do kind of a quick overview of what Housing Stability Services Program is. And then what our next steps are as far as getting our contracts signed, any required forms that you're going to need to submit, and the timelines, short-term and long-term for this program. We'll run over some of the guidelines and some of the questions that we've been receiving individually from agencies that are going to be helpful to repeat to some other of the agencies on the line as well. Alex will be going into a detailed view of our monthly reporting requirements. And this will refer to the Excel spreadsheet that is in part of your handout. So if when we get to that part, you want to follow along, go ahead and download that now. That again is also posted on our website. Then we'll review next steps after this training, what's going to happen, how we're going to get from this training today to contract execution and funds being distributed and used for housing stability services. And again, there will be questions and answers at the end of this session. Okay. So I just want to kind of step back and give a general overview of what the Housing Stability Services Program is. This is a federal funded program through Treasury, through their Treasury's Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is from funds provided through two sources. We refer to them as ERA-1 and ERA-2. The only difference is the two pieces of federal legislation that created the funding that both go into this emergency rental assistance program. So ERA-1 was established under the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, and it was enacted in December of 2020, so pretty recently. And then ERA-2, a slightly separate pot of funds that also feeds into this emergency rental assistance program, was established under the American Rescue Plan of 2021, and this was just enacted in March of 2021. So some pretty new funds, pretty new program, and we're thrilled at TDHCA to be a part of this. The contracts that we are going to talk about today, all of the services that you're going to provide fall under that ERA-1 bucket. So if you've been reading online through some of the Treasury guidance, we're not talking about ERA-2 at this point, only ERA-1. There's some slight differences. Most notably, ERA-1 households must have been impacted by the COVID-19 outbreak. ERA-2 does not have that stipulation. So we'll get into that a little bit farther, but I did just want to mention we're just doing ERA-1 right now. So in Texas, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is provided in a couple of different ways. The first and the main way that Texas is administering this program is through what we call the Texas Rent Relief Program. So more than 90% of this very large allocation is going to rental assistance and utility assistance and arrears for both of those services to qualified households. A small portion of a very large allocation, 10%, can be used for housing stability services under the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So like I said, Texas is doing rent relief and housing stability services. So housing stability services is anything around rent assistance and utility assistance, any services that can be used for housing stabilization to keep a household, to help them maintain or obtain their housing. So for the ERA-2 funds, like I said, we're not talking about that now, but we will be releasing a NOFA towards the end of the year to release this additional pot of funding for housing stability services, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about contracts. So this is how we are going to actually get the organizations on the line to, to receive these funds and get started to administer this program. So right now we've got a contract boilerplate that is routing through our legal division, but there's been some recently updated guidance from Treasury about income certifications and a few other topics that has triggered some additional edits that we need to make sure make it into the contracts. We'll get to some of those updates a little bit later, but I did just want to let you know that it's for a very good reason that we have yet to release these contracts. We want to make sure that we're capturing the most updated guidance from Treasury that they had just released in August. So our contracts will still have a start date of September 1st, 2021, even though we're past that. We've been working with many of the agencies on the line to identify eligible activities that you may begin providing now. So you can start incurring costs between September 1st and whenever we actually execute the contract. So any allowable activities that are incurred between September 1st and your contract execution date will be reimbursed either through a one-time cash advance once your contract is executed, or in the regular monthly reimbursement process that comes with all of your monthly reporting requirements. And again, we'll get to that. So let me just touch on that advance of funds that I was mentioning. Alex, could you go ahead, please? Okay. So after our contract execution, you may request a one-time cash advance of funds that is no more than 30 days of your cash needs to administer this program. And you'll just submit to us a request in writing with the details of the use of these funds, what you're going to use it for in your program categories and then in your administrative funds. So just let us know what you need it for. That has to come in writing and then we'll approve it. There's no specific format for this. Just send us an email. We'll approve it, yes or no. Okay. So if you do advance this, request this advance of funds, you'll just be limited to the minimum amount of needs for the effective operation of your program during that time. And we really want you to get it as closely as possible with your actual cash requirements. We will not approve a surplus of cash up front. It all has to have, reasonable activities and administrative funds tied to it. So after this one-time option, payments will be made on a monthly reimbursement basis. So we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. But after, at the end of the month, you'll tell us how many households you served and what funds you need to be reimbursed for, and that will come through direct deposit. So in order to receive either the cash advance or your monthly reimbursements, you'll need to be set up to receive direct deposits from TDHCA. And then on the next slide, I've got all of the forms that we are going to require for contract implementation. I know I'm going through this pretty quick, but I want to make sure I cover all of this, so you can get started on gathering these forms. So these are the required forms that we're going to need when we implement your contracts. All the forms are posted online if you want to get started on them. There's an audit certification form. This basically gives our compliance division an idea of any other state or federal funds that your agency has received, and if there's any compliance issues with those funds, something that we would want to know about. The next two items are a direct deposit and a Texas identification form. These are the two forms we need so we can get you guys paid. This will set you up in our financial administration system. If your organization already has this on file with us for another program, for example, if you provide home single family or emergency solutions grants, you don't have to resubmit this unless there's a change that you'd like to make. You would need a new form. If you want this to go to a different account or something, just send us a new form. The information security and privacy agreement. Again, if you have this on file with the department, you don't need to submit a new one. The purpose of this is just to ensure security and privacy of protected information of households that are served under the program. And then finally, if this is the Housing Contract System Access Request Form. Even if you have this for a different program, we do need a new form specifically for the Housing Stability Services Program. This access request is by program, not through a blanket administrative division in TDHCA. On this form, you'll see once you open it and get going, there's a field for contract numbers. They will be assigned to you, so you can go ahead and get started completing the form. In advance of when your contract will actually be assigned, you'll each get a number that will be associated with your contract. Again, these are all available on the program webpage. Go ahead and get started filling out these forms. If you have any questions, let us know. So then as soon as contracts are ready, you're set up in the system, and you will be ready to start accessing funds and administering your program. So next I will go through the timeline. This is the monthly performance and expenditure report timeline. So every month after you've completed all of your activities, by the 6th of the month following the month where you've provided your services and activities, you'll have to report your performance data and your expenditure data. And when I say performance, I mean the number of households that you've served. And the, my dog is barking. Okay, my apologies for that. The joy of working from home. I hope there's some dog people on the line. Okay, so monthly performance and expenditure reports. Like I said, these are due on the 6th of each month. It covers the previous month's activities. And I realize that this is a very tight timeline if you've done other programs with TDHCA. Some of our other programs allow up to 30 days to submit your performance and your expenditure reporting. I wish we could give you longer, but this is because all of the emergency rent assistance activities in Texas, so the Housing Stability Services Program and the Texas Rent Relief Program, all of those activities need to be compiled and verified and submitted to Treasury by the 15th of the month. So that leaves TDHCA from the 6th to the 15th to compile all of this information, verify it, and send it up to our federal funder. So I do apologize in advance for the very short turnaround time of this reporting, and I appreciate your patience. We are in the same boat with you for turning around this reporting very quickly to Treasury. So. Based on the monthly performance and expenditure reports, if we could go to the next slide, this will inform our timeline of our benchmarks. So we've been working with you all over the last few weeks to get your benchmarks, your performance benchmarks set. This will go into your contract. This is not something that you're going to need to report on. We'll gather the information about your quarterly benchmarks based on your monthly reporting. So you only have to do monthly reporting. You do not additionally have to do a quarterly report. And I know I've mentioned this a lot in our individual calls, but we do encourage you to, set your benchmarks so they, will best serve the eligible households in your community, and they will best set your organization up for success. So, and I see a question coming in right now. If you don't meet the benchmarks, will the funds need to be returned? This is something that, if you're approaching an area where you're not meeting a benchmark, reach out to us first. Don't let us get to a point where, we're looking at your Q2 benchmarks and we see that you are, very, underperforming or you're not spending. We can work to do a contract amendment to change something around so that we would not have to be in a scenario where we would recapture funds and then allocate it to either another performing agency or, perhaps roll it back into the Texas Rent Relief Program. So it's not an automatic. If you don't meet your benchmarks, you lose your funding. It is not automatic. But we do want to make sure that, whatever you set now is attainable, sets you up for success. But we do have some flexibility to make sure that before we get to that quarterly view, you're still set up for success. So I know that's kind of a vague answer. It's a kind of, just let us know and we'll work on it. Okay, so before we get, into the nuts and bolts of the reporting that's gonna, inform this timeline, I want to go over a few pieces of program guidance that have come a lot in our conversations with a lot of the individual agencies. So I just wanted to share these things. On the next slide shows, what I'm going to talk about now, and then I'll hand it over to Alex towards the end of this list. So I'll go through eligibility requirements of the program, new guidance from Treasury, which refers to self-attestation for income determination, duplication of benefits, how we are recommending that be handled from the state level, and then allowable program and administrative costs and how this should be reflected in your administrative budget. So first, let's go to household eligibility requirements. So in order for a household to be eligible for this program, one or more individuals within the household will have qualified for unemployment benefits, or will have experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant costs, or experienced any other financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the COVID-19 outbreak. So as I mentioned before, that little difference between ERA 1 and 2 funds. For the ERA 1 funds, these current contracts, the household must have either a direct or indirect financial hardship due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Once we get to the second pot of funds later on in the year, that requirement to have a direct or indirect link to COVID-19 does not exist. Additionally, for eligibility for this program, one or more individuals in the household must demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. And then finally, the household income has to be at or below 80% of the area median income. That would include all members of the household over the age of 18. So I think I want to get to this piece about income verification and income determination with self-attestation. So this is the new guidance that has come from Treasury. I know this is a very busy slide. This is a really wordy slide. I typically don't like to throw up a bunch of words when I do a training, but I thought there's so much important stuff in here that I wanted to get this to you directly in writing. So per the updated guidance that Treasury released on August the 25th, self-attestation of household income, so someone in the household, the head of household or someone in the household, can attest that without any further verification as to the household income, that self-attestation is sufficient for determining income eligibility for housing stability services under the ERA 1 program. So they just provide a self-attestation that they meet the income eligibility requirements. It is, documented in a written self-attestation form. That is sufficient. Of course, with some caveats, as all government programs come. So the self-attestation from the household must be certified by either a caseworker, a navigator, or other housing stability services professional. If you do not have this certification from the housing services professional that you are certifying that this household, meets the self-attestation, then the subrecipient must reassess the household's income every 3 months by obtaining a new self-attestation or some other form of eligible income determination for the household. So we recognize that, and the guidance recognizes that there are some appropriate cases where a subrecipient can just rely on a direct attestation from a housing stability service professional. This would be your caseworker, your housing navigator, someone else within your organization or your network that has a knowledge of the household circumstances, and they can accurately verify that an applicant's household income does qualify for assistance. Households, you may always ask households to provide additional documentation upon request. If you do need some additional documentation to feel confident with certifying the self-attestation, you can request that information. On the income certification, they should specify the monthly or the annual income claimed by the household, just to ensure that we're meeting the applicable income requirements of the ERA program, and that we are reporting, accurately the income categories of all of the households served. I know this is a lot of information. It's a lot to digest, but I think this is a really great way to effectively and quickly serve households that may have some barriers to obtaining required documentation under some previous guidance. So Income for all household members 18 or older must be considered when attesting to the annual household income. All members included on a lease should also be included in this income determination, unless you're working with a household that is a tenant and they indicate that someone has left the lease or no longer resides in the unit if they are housed in a unit currently. Let's see. So you would need to retain documentation on this self-attestation, and record why you believe the household to be eligible. So this would be, just the certification that I mentioned from the subrecipient level, like, we certify and believe that the household, their self-attestation meets these income requirements. Beyond that, no other documentation or the self-attestation requires notarization. Just a signature and a date on that form is sufficient. We do not have a specific form for this. This is something that we can, certainly create a template. But this is something that you can, either create your own form just to meet all of these requirements, or you can add it to your own, income screener or your client or your household intake forms. So I know that's a lot. I expect we'll get into some further discussion about this, but I did just want to make sure to highlight this really important new guidance from Treasury that we were, we will reflect in contracts as an option, as the recommended option for income determination. So the last thing that I was going to talk about for the household eligibility requirements is on the next slide, which is our duplication of benefits. We've gotten some questions from some agencies that they serve in the same service area. They serve, possibly the same population. So in order to ensure that housing stability services are not being duplicated across multiple agencies, or even specific services are not being duplicated within your own agency, we're requiring that each household attest that they're not receiving duplicated housing stability services or funds specifically under this program. Again, this certification can be a standalone form or certification that you have someone, check and sign, or this provision can be added to part of an intake or a screening form that already exists at your agency. Please be sure to keep accurate records of this certification in your client files. This is the way that the state for this program is certifying that we are not duplicating benefits. In the absence of a statewide reporting system like HMIS, we have neither the time nor the resources to create this right now because this is such a short-term program. This is what we're relying on. So as long as you have that certification from the household that they're not receiving duplicated benefits, that's all we need. At the beginning of the training, I did mention that housing stability services was a piece of the Greater Emergency Rental Assistance Program in Texas, which we're calling the Texas Rent Relief Program. We are not at all concerned with duplication of benefits between housing stability and rent relief. In fact, we highly, highly encourage that households that are eligible for both types of this assistance under ERA do access both types of assistance. So one of the eligibilities under housing stability services for agencies on the line is to assist households with their Texas rent relief application. So if you are, serving a household, they need help applying for rent assistance, we highly encourage you to help them apply for Texas rent relief. And later on, after we get our contracts implemented, we will be providing some training on how you would assist households to apply for this program if that is something that you have indicated in your performance benchmarks that you'd like to provide. So at this point, I think I can hand it over to Alex unless there are any questions that we want to take now, or we can hold them till the end. So Alex and Frank, I'll let you guys decide on how you want to proceed.
Sure. We had one question, so going back to slide 7, the email address for the forms to be sent to when they're submitted.
That's a good question. We have you can send it to any one of us. If you have a main contact person, it's either Alex or Frank at this point that you've been working with your performance benchmarks, you can send it to them. We also have an email address. It's just hss@tdhca.state.tx.us. That email address is on our website. You can send all of the forms to that email address. We all have access to it. So if you send it that way, it will definitely be received. But there's not a specific designated forms collection email address.
Great. And one more, are we required to reassess a household's income every 3 months if assistance is provided one time?
If you are not assisting that household again, you would not need to reassess their eligibility. So if they come in one time for a service, you do their self-attestation at that point. If they're not continuing with you as a client through the remainder of the program contract period, you don't need to go ahead and reach out to them and make sure that they still qualify. However, if they do continually come back and receive services from you through the length of the program, if you don't have certification from a housing professional in your organization, then you would need to reassess that household every 3 months. So if you do accept the self-attestation, and then the housing stability professional, the caseworker, the navigator does certify that, you do not need to reassess that household every 3 months. So it would be recommended to accept the self-attestation, and require additional documentation if you need it. And then once you have a certification signed from your housing stability services professional, signed and documented in that client's file, that's all you need. You can stop right there. In the absence of that additional certification from the housing professional, yes, you would need to recertify every 3 months.
If I can add here, I'm Alex. Just one small additional caveat to this is if you did have a household who received assistance for a month, maybe 2 months, so forth, then they did not receive assistance for for over the period of time of 3 months since they last self-attested. If they come back and ask for assistance, so say they come back and they want a help with the security deposit or a landlord incentive or so forth, then that household would have to reattest to their income, right? So it's not just a case of continuous assistance. It is you have a 3-month period where that self-attestation is good if it is not certified. So just to clarify on that.
Okay, I think we're good on questions to answer right now, and we can take some more then.
Great, thank you guys. So I'll hand it over to Alex now, and he is going to talk about, what did I say? Eligible activities and then reporting. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Alex Postelnik again. So what I'm going to start talking on about right now is some kind of tricky areas with guidance on what is an allowable program cost and not an allowable program cost. This is not an exhaustive list. We recommend that you look at our FAQ on the website if you have more specific questions, but these are just more tricky nuances of the guidance that have come up in our discussions with individual organizations and working through your performance benchmarks. I'm going to start off at the top of this list here and start off with this distinction between therapy and mental health services, which is an allowable program cost, versus prescriptions, medical equipment, and any sort of medical expenses, which is not an allowable program cost. So in the first case, anything that's some sort of medical counseling, substance abuse counseling, mental health counseling, group therapy, or any form of therapy is going to be an allowable program cost, including your personnel. However, this program is not designed to be a medical assistance program, and it actually runs into liability issues as funds coming through the Treasury with anything having to do with prescriptions, medical equipment, or medical expenses. One of the questions we've received in the past is, could we hire a nurse who provides, for instance, mental health counseling services, but also wants to write prescriptions or provide medical checkups or things like that? The answer to that question is both yes or no. None of our program funds can go to fund the billable hours or the equipment necessary for those medical expenses, right? However, you can bill services provided that are mental health counseling services to our program. So there's a distinction there. The second thing is related to transportation, and that's transportation for clients or staff to provide services including cab fare, gas reimbursement, Uber or Lyft. We do ask that you are, no $100 or extremely expensive multiple city Uber or Lyft fares, please. But these are going to be reimbursable under the program if they are to provide a direct housing stability service to a client. So if one of your housing navigators is going to visit a client, if you're transporting clients to get to a job interview, to get to view a unit, to talk to a landlord, to sign a lease, these are going to be eligible expenses. Gas is reimbursed at the IRS 2021 rate, which will then, of course, switch to the 2022 rate at a later date. What is not an allowable program cost is going to be anything dealing with vehicle purchase, vehicle repair, or non-service related travel expenses. So for instance, if you had an administrative staff that was looking to pick up, say, supplies for a housing counseling service or something like that, or an in-person training, that would be administrative, right? Because they're picking up that stuff to help you facilitate some part of the program, but it's not going directly to help a client. The third thing is related specifically to personnel, and that's that any client-facing program staff will be eligible under this program to have their salary and their fringe benefits paid for from the program budget. So this would be case managers, housing navigators, substance abuse counselors, mental health counselors, and so forth. What is not eligible to be spent out of the program budget is going to be administrative staff, program managers without client interaction, kitchen staff, and janitorial staff, right? So there really has to be a direct link on a client-facing service that staff is provided, and you'll have to retain some sort of documentation that is what that job is meant to do, particularly through a job description. One of the things that we have, said that is possible is that you can hire, for instance, a lead case manager, a lead housing navigator, kind of senior positions that are client-facing that might perform some management roles, as long as they're predominantly client-facing and you can document that. On our third thing of eligibility here is going to be related to technology. So you are allowed to purchase a computer or broadband, so internet assistance, to help a program participant attend an HSS training program, search for employment, or communicate with a remote medical provider. So this is actually very straightforward in our FAQ. It's a bright line here that these are the reasons that you can purchase a computer or broadband assistance for a client. However, if it's anything on your end for a purchase of computers or internet or phone service for your staff to use, or say just for general use, then this is going to be an admin expense, right? So once again, it has to have that direct kind of link to the client, and it has to be to provide them with a housing stability service. So the next thing is related to rental assistance. So as Kate mentioned earlier, the ERA program is split both into housing stability services as well as the Texas Rent Relief Program. For allowable program costs for the housing stability services, this program includes rental deposits, pet deposits, utility deposits, landlord incentives, and utility reconnection fees. So anything needed to ensure that a household maintains stable in housing or is able to obtain new housing. However, when it comes to things like rental arrears or future rental assistance, as well as future utility assistance or utility arrears, then clients will have to apply for the Texas Rent Relief Program in order to receive these funds. However, as Kate also mentioned, we highly encourage awardees rather to use these funds to hire caseworkers, housing navigators that will directly help your clients apply for Texas Rent Relief Program. So that is an eligible expense. So helping people apply for Texas Rent Relief. The last thing is related specifically to outreach services. So shelter outreach and landlord outreach, so long as these activities directly serve eligible households, is a program expense, and this includes your personnel. It gets a little tricky here, which is why we have it on this table, but there really needs to be a direct link that you are performing outreach in order to, intake people into the program as far as shelter outreach goes, and for landlord outreach, that you are educating and reaching out to landlords specifically so you can link that landlord with providing housing or shelter to an eligible household. So there has to be a direct link there for it to be an eligible expense. What is not allowed under program funds but can be expended under your admin funds is any sort of general marketing, outreach, and public affairs expenses that don't directly serve eligible households. So something as simple as a flyer might not directly benefit a household in the same way as a caseworker actually going and talking to a household, telling them about the program and trying to perform intake. So these are some of our trickier ones. Like I said, they are not exhaustive, and there's more details in the FAQ. I'm going to go on to two other large eligible expenses that we want to talk about here today. And this relates to gift cards and then security deposits and landlord incentives. I know we've been in conversation with a few of your organizations related to gift cards. We've been in conversation with our legal team, and we've really been interpreting, federal administration law in regards to the use of gift cards. And we've received guidance on gift cards that if you want to give gift cards to eligible households, then you have to keep receipts or somehow track that those expenses that the gift card was used for, what it's been used to purchase, are eligible for the program. So basic clothing and hygiene and food expenses. It doesn't necessarily need to be a paper receipt. You can have electronic receipts. If you use a gift card that allows you to check what it's expended on the internet, then that will all work, but you do need to keep track of it. Now, this has one caveat to it, and that's that you do not have to track whether or not the gift cards were spent on eligible expenses if it was a vendor that only sells eligible items such as food, clothing, or sanitary products. So some examples we give here are restaurants, provided that they are, affordable and kind of within the bounds of what the program is meant to provide, food co-ops, or resale clothing stores, right? So all these things only provide, eligible services. So you couldn't go and say, buy, the example we've been using is a lawn chair, which, if furniture ends up being allowed, and we're still waiting on guidance on that, that could change, but right now is not an allowable expense. So gift cards to Walmart, Target, HEB, big box stores where they sell a lot of things are not going to be eligible unless you manage to keep receipts. You must document these expenses in a gift card use in a client file so that we can keep track of them. You also must have a written policy and controls regarding gift card use that is compliant with 2 CFR Part 200, the federal code related to the giving of gift card assistance. So this means that you have to have a written policy about where you're keeping gift cards, who's going to receive them. You can't have them kind of out in the open, just laying around for anyone to use, for instance. The last thing is that if you're using a gift card where you need to pay a fee to use it, such as like a Visa gift card or something like that, that charges a fee, then that's going to count as an admin expense up proportional to the amount of eligible assistance that was spent on the gift card, right? So if the gift card was spent entirely on ineligible expenses, then you could not use any of your admin budget to pay for the fee. The last thing I have for security deposits and landlord incentives are just a few quick pieces of guidance. We're largely letting you all develop your own security deposit and landlord incentive programs. We're trusting your caseworkers and your expertise on the ground to develop these programs in what is needed in your local communities. However, there are a few things with the Treasury that we are required to make sure are put in these programs. The first is that a security deposit or landlord incentive must not exceed 1 month's rent in value. So it can't be more than the cost of 1 month rent. And the second is that you're going to need to document incentive payments and or security deposits in a lease agreement, right? So what this ends up looking like is up to your organization, the conditions you want to put on incentive payments or not, but it has to be in a lease agreement, likely as an addendum, that landlord incentive was received, and then you can keep that for your records. And that's going to be sufficient for us for this program at this time. So gift cards and security deposits and landlord incentives are something that we have received renewed guidance on. The next thing we have is related to administrative budget. I know that it's been tricky and there's been a lot of questions about what counts as an administrative expense and what counts as a program expense for this program. One of the things to remember, as Kate talked about earlier, is that this program is really meant to provide quick emergency assistance to households affected by the pandemic, right? So it's program funds really should be having that direct link to assisting households, and everything else needs to go into that administrative budget. So with your administrative budget, there's a few things you can incur that can help with the functioning of the program. This includes salaries and fringe benefits for non-program related personnel, so like managers, bookkeepers, anyone who's not directly interfacing with clients. Supplies and overhead, so supplies even for your program related personnel need to be paid out of your admin budget. So things like pens, papers, printer ink, things like that would need to come out of the administrative budget. So large equipment, depending on what it is, would need department approval. So if you're thinking of purchasing any large equipment, that's something to speak with us about. And the last thing is transportation and mileage for administrative functions. So I already talked about this, but if it's transportation or mileage that does not directly serve a client, then that would have to come from your administrative budget, and that would also be charged at the IRS 2021 rate. The last thing is the funds requested for your administrative budget are limited. This is a hard cap. They are limited to 7% of the total amount of funds requested. So you cannot go over that 7% with our funds. Even if you have a federal indirect cost rate, even if you're taking the de minimis rate, however you're doing your budget, no more than 7% of our total amount of funds requested can go to administration, right? So that is one thing to keep in mind going forward. I'm going to wrap that up with eligible costs and our administrative budget. I am at this time going to go ahead through monthly reporting. However, if you have any sort of questions regarding the eligibility, hang on to them right now. Frank will be, monitoring questions in the box, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. So let's go into monthly reporting right here. As Kate mentioned, by the 6th of each month, you are going to have to provide two main pieces of data to us for all households served and expenditures from the previous reporting month. So for instance, October 6th deadline is for the month of September. There's going to be two main forms of data that you're going to provide for us. The first is going to be a household level data set that we are required to collect for the Treasury. This monthly report by household spreadsheet will also be how we calculate your quarterly performance benchmarks. So this spreadsheet is terribly important, and we need it to be able to calculate those benchmarks. But for your month-to-month draw, we're going to be using the housing contract system, which we will get to in a second, and that's going to be aggregate data for the total amount of unduplicated households served in that reporting month. But we'll get to that in a second. First, what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you this monthly report by household spreadsheet. There's multiple ways you can access this right now. One is you can click, well, I don't know if you can actually click this link here, but you can go to our website at this link provided, or you can go to the handouts in your toolbar for GoToWebinar right now, and you can select on the monthly reporting spreadsheet. So I'm going to click our link here, and it's going to pull up our website. I'm going to go down to monthly performance and expenditure reporting, and then I'm going to go to the monthly report by household spreadsheet. I'm going to open this file up. I'll bring this file over so that you all can view it. And if you want to follow along with me here, you're more than welcome to. So, one of the first things you'll notice about this spreadsheet is that it is protected, except for the areas where you are required to provide an input. And it, unless you're able to guess my dog's birthday for the password, it's protected here. But the instructions, and the reason we do that is for the fact that we have very, very strict reporting requirements to the Treasury, and we have a quick turnaround in getting that information to them. So, this allows us to quickly submit all this data to the Treasury, ensure it's in order without having to manipulate the data excessively. So that is why the spreadsheet is locked. However, there are fields that you will be able to edit within the spreadsheet. So I'm not going to go in depth on every single thing we're going to collect, because you have a handy dandy instruction box here that will tell you how to collect this data and serves as kind of a quick data dictionary for the things we wish to collect. However, I am going to kind of go through how you're going to fill out the spreadsheet. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like here. I currently have up all of the options for drop downs that appear on this spreadsheet. So you can see what the options are as soon as you pull up the spreadsheet. However, for the purposes of this training, I am going to delete what is currently in place here. So that we can fill it out. And what we end up with is a clean spreadsheet. So up here, you're going to put in the name of your organization. You're going to select your reporting month. So once again, if you're submitting on October 6th, it's going to be September 2021. You have a unique identifier. We're leaving this up to your organization to decide how you want to assign identifiers, but this pretty much means that we have a record here that through this identification code is linked to a client file on your end. So we don't want to receive any personal identifiable information through these digital sources. So this will allow us to keep track of client files without receiving that information. So this next piece of information is extremely important. And this is how we are going to largely measure your quarterly performance. And that's whether or not the household was a first-time recipient of housing stability services or not from your organization. So you will need something on your intake form or in your internal processes to determine whether a household is a first-time recipient. But luckily, this is a very easy yes/no. So you're going to put all of the households on a line-by-line basis. So this might be, household 2000 here, or whatever that is. And then they may have received services from you before, right? So these are unduplicated within the reporting month, but it is going to be exhaustive of all the households you have served, whether or not they've previously received assistance. But you do have to keep track of whether they're a recurring client. Then you're gonna do zip code, household county, household size. So let's actually just fill these out real quick, just as an example. Household income. So, let's do, trying to remember the AMI limits for Travis County, but just go with it, even if I'm wrong. Your household, the household's income, self-attested and then maybe certified. And then their AMI category. So I'm going to click 80% for this one. I'm not sure if that's entirely correct. We do have the HUD income limits on our website for you to view about how to calculate AMI level. There's things in the instructions about, how to calculate AMI level for a person who's experiencing homelessness and so forth. So there are instructions regarding that. Then we have gender of applicant. And what we are using for these demographic columns here, gender, race, ethnicity, are exactly the categories that Treasury gives us, right? So we do not choose these categories. So you'll notice that for gender of applicant, it's male, female, non-binary, declined to answer, right? So you're gonna ask them to, self-describe themselves on the scale, and fill out according to these categories provided by Treasury. For race of household, we have another list here, and then ethnicity of household listed here. So what we're settling on for, race and ethnicity of household, it's going to be self-identification. So for subrecipients who do not currently have a method in place for aggregating race and ethnicity household data, maybe you only work with ESG, so you do it on an individual basis or so forth, then what we are saying is to ask the household, how would you describe your household's race, right? And then have them, select from these categories. How would you describe the ethnicity of your household, right? So it's very much a self-identification, because we recognize that there are difficulties with picking, a race and ethnicity of an entire household. But that is what we are working with as per the Treasury guidance. The last thing we have is veteran in household, older adult in household, children under 18 in household, and person with disability in household. And this will just be a quick yes or no, depending on whether or not just one person in the household identifies in that category. So that is our monthly household report. There is a caveat to this whole thing. As you've noticed here at the bottom, we have a tab for meal services only, and this is very important. There's something listed in the instructions about how to do this, but if your program is either entirely providing meal services or is providing a mass meal services program, then you do not need to collect this household data. We've received and worked on establishing new guidance for this. You will just have to report the total meals served that were financed by HSS funds in the reporting month. If you have households who have both received a meal from you and have received another service, then their demographic information will be collected here for that other service. However, for meal services, all we need is the total meals that you have served in that reporting month that have been financed with HSS funds. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how do we submit this. So let's say we have the spreadsheet done, right? How are we going to go ahead and submit this? If you go to our website, you'll notice down here that we have this little tool that is from smartsheet.com. And if you click on this link right here, we have a form for you to fill out to submit this information. So you're going to submit your subrecipient name. You're going to put in your contract number. This will eventually be a drop-down list. So you'll just select your name, but it'll also have a contract number associated with it. And then contact information for reporting. And this is very important because, like we've said, we have a very quick turnaround for this reporting information. So you need to put in a contact person. It's usually going to be the person submitting these reports, right? So the name, the title of that individual, and let me just say, Alex, program admin, and then this isn't my email, but let's just do alex@gmail.com, and then a phone number. So that way I can get a hold of your representative, if there is a problem with reporting. The next thing is going to be reporting month and year. So once again, for October 6th, it's September. For November 6th, it's October. And then you're going to drop that spreadsheet that we've just completed. Let's see. Oh, I actually do not have it saved on my my desktop anymore. How did a second go? But you're going to put the spreadsheet right in here for your reporting, the one that we just completed. And then if I had put the spreadsheet in here, you'd click submit, and then it gives you a little kind of box that tells you this has been completed. We'll also put in a system that sends you a confirmation email as well. So this is how you're going to submit that information for the household level reporting. Once again, this household level reporting is going to be how we do your quarterly benchmarks and how we submit information to the Treasury both every month and by quarter. So it's very important that you submit this information. The next kind of piece of information you're going to submit is for your draws. So when you look to get reimbursed at the end of the month, it's going to go through our housing contract system. So this is still in development, and we're actually going to do a training after, around the time contracts are signed and we have, everyone's contract number, etc., on this system so that you're able to use it. But this is an idea of what it's going to look like and what you're going to have to input. And this is aggregate data, right? So everything that you just put into that individual household spreadsheet, the totals should add up to the totals in this housing contract system, correct? So you're going to keep a tab on your aggregate data, And this is what we will be using to, validate and confirm draws each month. But more on that at a later date. So that's all I have for right now on our reporting system and the requirements for reporting. I'm actually going to pass this back to Kate to discuss next steps and to wrap up our presentation before we get into the question and answer section.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex, for all that very detailed and important information. So we've relayed a lot of information to you today. The next steps going forward at the TDHCA level, we're going to get those contracts, the contract boilerplate finalized and ready for you to sign. A piece of that contract will be your performance benchmarks. So the way we typically do contracts at the state level is all of the standard agreement stuff is in the main part of the contract. And then attached to that is going to be your agency specific or your organization specific benchmarks. So please work with us to finalize those benchmarks. If you do want to start incurring costs, we'd like to have those finalized sooner rather than later. I know some of you have received the green light to go ahead and incur costs already, which is wonderful. So please work on finalizing those benchmarks with our staff here. Also, please work on gathering those required forms that we talked about earlier. Everything, like I said, is on the website. If you have any questions about filling out those forms, let us know now so that by the time we need to go ahead and get your organization set up with the comptroller to start receiving funds, we don't have to wait and answer questions at that point. I'd like to get those all kind of collected and completed as soon as possible. So please work on those. When the contracts are ready, they'll come out from me, from my email address via DocuSign. So please identify someone in your organization that has either board authority or executive authority to sign contracts for program administration. So please identify that person that will have the authority to sign your contract. Usually it's the someone on the board or the executive director or someone with designated signatory authority. So when that comes out, you'll go through a review process, ask us any questions, and then sign that. Once that contract is signed, then you'll be eligible to request your cash advances and to start serving and incurring costs and receive your reimbursements. So again, the next thing that Alex mentioned that is the next step on our part is to provide a walkthrough of the housing contract system reporting process. It's a twofold process. It's first your total number of households that you've served per month, the aggregate data. And then it's also the financial information. So we want to know how many households you've served and how much funding you need to reimburse yourself for those households served. So you'll give us how much you'd like in your program funds and your administrative funds. So again, like I said, as we get these screens built in our housing contract system, we will walk you through step by step, bit by bit on how to successfully and efficiently submit your performance and expenditure reports each month. This is a real important piece, I know, for the agencies that have previously received funding from us. This is what triggers your monthly payments and your draws. So you have to do the performance report first, then your financial report. We'll approve it on our end, we'll send it to our financial department, and they will issue a direct deposit for your expenditures. Until then, I would encourage everyone to please sign up for our listserv announcements. A link for those listserv to sign up for that is on the Housing Stability Services webpage. It's a whole list of topics that TDHCA sends emails about. Make sure you select the specific topic for housing stability services. So any other, mass communications going forward about program information, new postings to the website, training opportunities, anything that's not specifically for your organization will be distributed through that listserv. So if you've got, a group of staff working on this, someone goes on vacation, everyone else on that listserv will be able to receive that information. Let's see. And then the final thing I wanted to mention, Alex, if you could scooch ahead to the next slide, please, is just a reiteration of the next pot of funds that come out. I know we haven't even started, with contract execution of these ERA funds, but we are very, very closely looking forward to releasing a NOFA for the ERA 2 funds. Like I said, there's some slight differences with ERA 1 and 2. One of the main things is that COVID, impact. You wouldn't have to verify that for the household. The other difference is it has a much longer time for expenditure. So right now we're looking at, just a year for expenditures for the ERA 1 funds. ERA 2 has a much longer allowable time for expenditures. So if you are interested, please, sign up through the listserv, check our webpage. We'll be releasing information about that in the coming months. So at this point, I think that's all of the information we have to present for this, very first webinar. We'll be providing more information going forward, more trainings. So I think I'll hand it back to Frank and to Alex for questions.
Sure. So this is Frank. We have one that's straightforward, but I think would be useful just to reiterate. We had a question: is rent considered an acceptable programmatic expense under the HSS program? And so under this program, rent will not be considered an eligible programmatic expense. Clients should apply through the TRR program for rental arrears and rent payments. Kate, I have one for you. Would a client be able to receive, or would a landlord be able to receive on behalf of the client a deposit of 1 month in addition to a landlord incentive fee?
Yes, that's a good question. As long as it is documented as a different type of payment. A deposit payment is something that is already part of the regular requirements for the housing services. That is not an incentive payment. So you can make the clear difference between a deposit, which is kind of a regular payment, which is an allowable expense, and then separately a landlord incentive payment, also allowable as a separate expense. You wouldn't be duplicating the types of payments to support that household. So yes, you can provide both a deposit and a landlord incentive fee if that is something needed to stably house that household. That's a good question.
Is there a dollar limit per household for restaurant gift cards?
That is also a good question. I think we'll have to get back to someone on that. I mean, my non-technical response is, we would not allow a $300 gift card to a steakhouse. That doesn't seem like a good use of program funds, but we'll provide some more specific parameters on limits on gift cards. Certainly, it depends on the household. A household with multiple children or dependents, will need different services and different types of gift cards. So depending on the household, but we'll provide additional guidance on that, specifically on any limits.
One of the things I'd like to note is that is something to also be thinking about with what your own program's policies will be related to gift cards, because as I noted in the the eligibility for gift cards, you will have to have a policy in place. So what restaurants would you like to give gift cards to for? Why those restaurants? If so there, we will let you know if there are, definite caps or limits on what type of restaurants, but also, be working on within your organizations to determine, what are you looking to do? What is your goal? And we will also work with you on that, right? So, I don't expect anyone's going to be wanting to give out gift cards for, expensive steakhouses and so forth. And that is something probably that, our compliance staff would flag. But, be thinking about like how your policy would, not allow that, explicitly not allow that. So if you're looking to do gift cards, there's a little bit where we'd like conversation with you, present your policy to us. And that'll help us also establish these program requirements.
Sure. And Alex, here's another one that we've gotten some questions around. Is leasing a vehicle for client transportation an allowable expense on the programmatic side?
I will say right now, leasing a vehicle, I'm going to say no. I'm fairly certain that leasing a vehicle would not be allowed, and it's since it's so close to actually like purchasing a vehicle. Not to mention the terms for leasing a vehicle are usually extend over multiple years. Car rentals is a different kind of discussion. My inclination right now is to say that probably would also not be allowed. That's something we'd have to look into the federal code and guidelines for. But I will check with our legal staff on that. But I would assume at this time, car rentals, won't be allowed. But there's nothing preventing, a client from getting a cab or, getting an Uber, as long as they document or you document what they use that for, right? So, we wouldn't be able to reimburse Uber costs to, to go to entertainment events and things like that, or so that's one thing to keep in mind as well.
Great. And would a gas card be eligible rather than an Uber for clients if it's directly tied to housing stability?
Yeah, so Kate can also chime in on this one if she wants, but the answer to this one is probably a no, and a fairly definite no, because of the logistical problem with it, of being able to check what that gas is used on, for instance. So, there's things that, gas could be used on, that would not be an eligible expense. You could technically use a gas card to, purchase gas for like a lawnmower or something like that, or use it to, attend a concert or etc. So, gas cards, I don't see how it would work out logistically.
Alex, I can chime in on this one. Yeah, I'll chime in on this one. So, gas cards, you can treat them similar to the big box stores. It's allowable to provide these as long as they come with receipts for eligible expenses. So that would be, documentation of destinations and mileage and the receipts of the gas that was paid for from that card that assisted that household to receive household stability services. So yes, it is allowable only if it comes with specific destinations or mileage and documentation with receipts. And this is something that is part of that 2 CFR 200 requirement that comes along with federal funds.
Great. We have a question about security deposits. So Kate, if you wanted to take this one, security deposits are often more than 1 month's rent. Are we able to provide more than 1 month's rent through this program? And can we use 2 different programs if the deposit is more than 1 month's rent? And we're not allowed to use funds from this program for that.
Okay, so yeah, there's a couple of questions in here. So, you know, the guidance that we've received is that deposit cannot exceed 1 month's rent. That is, anything beyond that would not be a reimbursable or you know, allowable incurred cost. If that is something that, you know, other funds could pay for from your organization, that would be fine. But it cannot come from this program. And I do know that it is, you know, those funds can often exceed 1 month's rent, but that is the guidance that we have to go with. Kind of tying back to one of the previous questions, you know, there are, you know, if you had deposit fees and then separately landlord incentive payments or landlord incentive fees, those are 2 separate types of payments, and that would be allowable.
Okay, and we have a question just around the duplication of services requirement for that sign off. So just can you please clarify the duplication of services requirement for the organization?
Sure, yeah, let's go back to that slide. It's slide 14. So for this specific program, we do need to have some type of mechanism that certifies that households are not receiving a duplication of benefits. We are requesting that this come in a household certification. I know that there are, you know, other programs and organizations that do this automatically, but this is, you know, this is the guidance that we're going with, saying that, you know, as part of your intake or as part of your, you know, verification of eligibility, we do need to have specific duplication of benefits certification from each household. It can be, you know, your own standalone certification form, part of an intake form, part of a screening form, a checkbox, something that says, check, this client is not receiving duplication of benefits. So, you know, you can certainly verify that through an HMIS system or, you know, some other database systems to have additional documentation, but we do need to have that duplication of benefits certification in the client file. This is something real specific from the Treasury guidance that we have heard. And then our compliance staff, you know, when they do come to monitor for this program, they'll, you know, select a couple of client files just to see that, you know, duplication of benefits certification checked and signed in the file, you're good to go. So I hope that answers the question.
Great.
I want to chime in here just real quick and say, return to the question of security deposits. The Treasury provides guidance that, you know, security deposits should not exceed 1 month's rent unless it's customary within that market to provide, you know, more than 1 month's rent. And it's like, you know, it's a pretty strict standard. So it's one of those things where if you really felt that security deposit assistance is something that you would not be able to do on this program, because all of the eligible apartments are asking for more than 1 month's rent in your market, then speak with us and we might come up with a way of, you know, documenting that, you know, for Treasury purposes. However, at this time, you know, go with the presumption that, you know, 1 month's rent is the limit. But if you really do feel like that is a heavy burden for your security deposit assistance program, then speak with us.
We've had several questions around landlord incentives. So like what qualifies, what the limits are. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but Kate, would you be able to talk a little bit more about this?
Sure. So I'm kind of wondering if these questions are coming from organizations who have not already put this in their benchmarks. These are great questions, but this is something that, you know, we will provide some real specific training on going forward. This is something that will be a lot more fleshed out in the ERA2 NOFA. Just to give that caveat, I'd say if you're not, you know, currently set up or have the capacity to do this right now, you might want to rethink, you know, just, you know, adding this in last minute into your benchmark. So just, you know, make sure that whatever you submit to us, you have the capacity to do, and you do meet as closely as possible to those benchmarks. So that being said, landlord incentive payments could be, you know, it could be a number of things, and we will provide, you know, a more careful definition of this. But it's something outside of regular rent deposits, regular fees, utility deposits, you know, anything outside of the regular things that are noted in a lease to assist a household get into that that unit to be stably housed. So it could just be, you know, hey, we're going to offer you this amount of money, you know, an extra rent payment in order to house this household that, you know, maybe their credit doesn't meet your credit standards, or you know, they have some questionable rental history. You know, what type of incentive could be provided to help that landlord feel comfortable that housing this household that may, through a variety of circumstances, you know, had some things that are, you know, now showing up on credit checks or, you know, rent checks that that are not helping them, that are a barrier to maintaining or obtaining that housing. So I know that that's kind of vague. Alex and Frank, you know, please chime in here if you've got some more specific information. But this is just some other type of incentive to help this landlord feel more comfortable about housing a specific household. I know in some of our other programs, they serve populations that have severe mental illness, and some landlords do require or do you know, accept an incentive for an additional, you know, damage deposit if they feel, you know, they'd like to make sure that, you know, housing speaking off the cuff here, I'm trying to be real careful here. So, you know, if they feel like they need additional deposits for damage, it could be, you know, an extra fee like that. So, Alex and Frank, would you have anything else to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it. And I think any specific questions, like you said, that are within the proposed activities, if you all email us specifically around, you know, landlord incentives, we can get you clarification on the specific question you're wondering about.
I do want to piggyback on that, Frank, and kind of reiterate what Kate said at the beginning, though. You know, if landlord incentive payments is not something your organization has done before, or you're not immediately prepared to set up that system, then it's, you know, something that you may want to wait into our ERA2 NOFA, where we set up more requirements for it, because, you know, we will be sending, you know, compliance monitors to monitor your programs and so forth. And they are going to look at, you know, that you have been keeping a lease for that landlord incentive payments, that you have a policy written out for that as landlord incentive payments, that they are given out with purpose, and they have, the latitude to look at whether or not you're being, completely unreasonable with your landlord incentive payment program, right? So it is something we'll provide more guidance on for, ERA 2 NOFA, but because these funds, have to be up and running quick, we want to get them to people. And landlord incentive payments are something that is desperately needed right now to house, eligible households. So if you have the capacity to do that now, then by all means continue to keep it in your performance benchmarks. But for some of you, it may be something that you'll think about, and we'll go through with the ERA 2.
Great. We have a question here. Will all these eligibility guidelines be included in the updated FAQ? Yes, they will be. So we will be updating that and be sending it out shortly.
That's a great question. Based on the guidance that was received most recently from Treasury and on August 25th, we wanted to make sure to include that information. So that will all be included and posted and distributed as soon as possible.
Okay, and I'm just looking through the rest of the questions we have here.
Yeah, we're getting a couple of questions that are kind of program specific. So if yours is something that we need some follow up on, we will follow up directly with you. So Frank, if there's not anything else that you want to cover right now as a group, we can bring this to a conclusion and then follow up directly with any of the questions that you've sent to us as we're kind of wrapping up this session. I see there's a couple more coming in. We will make sure we get some direct responses to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one here just on admin very quickly. So this person asked, is the admin 7% of total funds or 7% of programmatic, budgeted programmatic costs? So is it allowable at 7% of the total funds allowed, or is it 7% of the programmatic costs?
I can take this one. So of your total award, let's say that your award was $100,000. Of that total award, you were allowed up to $7,000 for administrative funds. So of your total award, just take 7% of that. That's your eligible administrative funds. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, like Kate said, we will get back to you regarding these specific program questions that we have in the chat and anything else we didn't get to.
Could you please bring up the final slide, please, and then we'll wrap this up. So thank you everyone for sticking with us for 90 minutes of training. This is, I know, a lot of information. We will follow up directly with these questions. Sign up for the listservs, check out the website, all of those forms, ask us questions. Our direct contact information is here. All of our emails end with this at tdhca.state.tx.us. We also have that hss@tdhca.state.tx.us. If you just want to send a message there, any of us will get it, and we will try to respond to you as soon as possible. As I mentioned before, a recording of this webinar will be posted to our website within the next day or so. And the slides are available in the handout section here, and they are posted as well. So I appreciate all the work that we've done, all the work that you all have done in getting this far with your contract benchmarks, getting your budgets worked out. We will work as quickly as possible to get the contracts ready, to get the updated guidance posted and to have a very successful launch of this program. So I appreciate all the work that you've done, and thank you very, very much, and have a wonderful afternoon. I am going to end this webinar.